Good morning, everyone. My name is Annie Fudge, and I'm going to be here today to speak to you about an alternative assessment option presented in the article Beyond the Rubric, Think-Alouds as a Diagnostic Assessment Tool for High School Writing Teachers. So in this study, they were arguing whether or not rubrics were the most effective form for assessment writing. They say that research on writing rubrics is the most common and extensively used. But it might also have some problems about their writing. So in this paper, they were discussing the Think Aloud protocol assessment. From here out, I'm just going to call it the TAP assessment as a form of assessment tool in writing. This TAP assessment itself has students think aloud as they're going through the writing process, having a teacher sitting there kind of going through an assessment rubric of their own based on how these students are writing. They are all open-ended prompts to kind of work through strengths and challenges of the student, that the teacher can note any discrepancies between what the student said aloud and what they were writing. The Think Aloud protocol assessment record keeping sheet, the TAP kind of assessment sheet, has 15 open-ended questions with some room for commentary as well. It's everything from does the student interpret the prompt correctly to does the student generate support for the thesis, is the student able to stay focused and stay on task, and does the student get too caught up with the sentence level issues as opposed to the broader problem overall. One of the nice things about this is it definitely allows for this assessment to be directly on the writing process that day. Then sort of, I know that this student is at this level in their writing, and so when I grade their paper on this rubric, I'm going to be aware of that. It kind of eliminates sort of external factors from the grading process. The actual data was collected in 3 parts. So they did actual individual interviews with the teachers from the study. They observed and audio recorded the individual teachers using the TAP assessment, and then they interviewed a second time. What they found was the TAP assessment gave teachers more information on the initial writing assessment that they did on the actual writing process. So what the TAP assessment does is it really emphasizes the writing process for students versus just the overall end goal like a rubric does. So what's nice about this is it does give the teacher more information on what they need to be working on in their individual classroom. Some examples would have been like, I thought they could have worked around that. Maybe I need to work with the student a little bit on how to more quickly work through information, or that student really struggled with interpreting the prompt. Maybe in class we need to talk about prompt words and sort of what prompts are looking for. So that's really nice. The study also found, because it was with English language arts teachers and English as a second language teachers, that the ESL teachers focused much more on just like individual sentences and grammatical structure versus the whole overall piece. And the English language arts teachers were focusing more on the whole piece than the individual sentence structures. So that's just a little bit interesting that they both interpret things differently. Now, having read this article, I kept thinking kind of throughout the whole thing how impractical the TAP assessment was as an actual like summative assessment. It would be great for our auditory learners and our visual learners, but that doesn't mean it's exactly practical, particularly if you're in a larger school and you have 150, 200 students in a day and you somehow have to sit with all of them as they talk through things, and we know how unfocused high school students can sometimes be. I think this is a really great differentiated assessment tool. If you have a student who does not do well with the physical writing process, but is really good at sort of like articulating ideas in speech, this might be a really great way to give them an alternative option within the same prompt, so you wouldn't have to differentiate prompts at all. I also think it would be a really great idea as a formative assessment to kind of be able to spend a day going through your students and sort of asking them like, hey, this is a quick prompt about what we've been learning. Even if it's something within like a science class, like we've been talking about the job of the mitochondria, go ahead and write me a short paper about the mitochondria, and I'm just going to sit here and listen to you talk through it. It's a really great way to kind of find holes in thinking, which in a lot of these options in non-English classes that really build up on themselves is really useful. And I do think it's handy in an English class, particularly if you're as a pre-assessment going into a unit, whether it's going to be we're writing research papers this unit, we're writing persuasive essays, to really get a idea of how much information they're coming in with. Because if you have a group of students who have never written a persuasive essay before, they have no idea what they're doing, and you have them, you sort of sit with them as they're talking through it. You can say, these students know nothing. We're starting from ground zero. We've got to build ourselves up. Or you might be, let's talk about research papers and citations, and we're excited, and these students have got it. Then there's no reason to spend an entire week talking about credible sources, MLA, APA citations, how to make a works cited. So that's really, really nice as an option. So I think that the TAP assessment is a great tool to use in the classroom. I don't know how useful it would be in a larger assessment format, particularly in the world that we live in of standardized tests. I don't feel like it allows for the students to get used to that sort of environment, because we want to make sure that our students go into standardized tests aware of not only what they're asked of them, but we also know that they are ready to sit quietly and put their heads down and write. Because sometimes that's the option that they're given, and particularly if they're on a college-bound path, they can't exactly take an essay test in a room with 300 other kids in a lecture and be talking through the entire thing. So thank you so much for coming and sitting with me as we talk about this. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know, and we will hopefully talk to you again soon. Thanks.